Hi everyone, my name is Marc Wyss. I'm a doctoral student at ETH Zurich. In this presentation, I will talk about communication guarantees in the internet, a topic I've been working on together with Adrian and Perrig. The objective of our work is to provide availability guarantees for a specific class of traffic, namely short-lived intermediate rate communication. Examples include DNS communication, which often consists of a few packets only, to access to websites which range from hundreds of kilobits per second to a few megabits per second at most. In this example, a source host in network 1 sends traffic over the internet to a destination host in network 4. And the goal of our work is to protect the availability of this communication. However, volumetric DDoS attacks pose a threat to the availability of this communication. In network targeting volumetric DDoS attacks, an attacker tries to flood the network, so routers and links, with vast amounts of traffic in an attempt to cause congestion and ultimately getting legitimate traffic dropped. Existing solutions have their limitations. Leased lines and private backbones, for example, can be very expensive, while solutions like over-provisioning can only shift the problem but not fundamentally solve it. Rerouting and scrubbing can add additional latency, while per-flow fairness is often vulnerable to source address spoofing and Sybil attacks. Also, many systems, including pushback, they are reactive. They try to actively detect the malicious traffic to then block it. However, this comes with some detection delay and potential misclassifications. Also, recently proposed bandwidth reservation systems, they come at a substantial setup overhead. While this is not relevant for long-lived communication, such as video streaming or video conferencing traffic, it is actually relevant for short-lived communication, such as access to websites. So in summary, we observed that protecting short-lived intermediate rate communication in the internet is difficult. And in the following, I will provide 3 core insights that helped us overcome the limitations of previous systems. First, we observed that it's possible to pre-allocate a low rate at routers to avoid any kind of setup overhead. So in this example, an operator would allocate 1 gigabits per second for traffic from network 1, and then isolate this traffic from other traffic sources. And we stress that a low rate is actually enough for intermediate rate traffic aggregates. Second, to implement such network bandwidth isolation, we require source authentication. Otherwise, an attacker could simply claim that its traffic is originating from network 1 and thus deplete, so use up, all the bandwidth allocated to network 1. For this reason, we rely on a system called EPIC. With EPIC, every router can verify the authenticity of every packet's length and origin. However, EPIC requires path transparency, so end hosts need to learn the identities of on-path networks in order to know to which networks to authenticate their traffic to. Third, we observed that secure routing is actually essential for communication availability. If routing was not secure, then an attacker could potentially hijack and black hole all communication and thus trivially prevent any forwarding guarantees. For this reason, we rely on the Cyan Future Internet architecture, which prevents hijacking attacks by design. Also, Cyan provides path transparency, which is a requirement for EPIC. And lastly, I will talk about later why and how we leverage Cyan's concept of isolation domains, so ISDs, which are trust-based groupings of networks. Based on those 3 core insights, we designed a system called Z-Lane. Z-Lane consists of 2 parts. First, a scheduling mechanism at the router, and second, a gateway to be deployed at source networks, so at the edge. The purpose of the Z-Lane router is to implement bandwidth isolation of traffic from different networks. So in this example, an operator would configure 1 gigabits per second for each source network. If a source network then sends traffic at the volume that's below that configured rate, then that traffic is guaranteed to be forwarded. However, if a source network sends traffic that exceeds the guaranteed rate, then only the first 1 gigabits per second are guaranteed to be forwarded, while all the traffic exceeding the guaranteed rate is only forwarded as best effort. To implement such bandwidth isolation, a trivial solution would be to use per network queues. However, this does not scale to the size of the internet, which consists of tens of thousands of networks. Therefore, in Z-Lane, we chose a different approach where we only use one priority queue plus per network token buckets. Per token bucket, the memory overhead is only 20 to 60 bytes. Also, checking rate compliance only requires tens of nanoseconds. In our work, we further optimize this, so we propose a memory-optimized token bucket that only requires 8 instead of 20 to 60 bytes of memory. Also, we allow to configure rates at the level of groups of networks instead of for individual networks only. And for this, we leverage science concept of isolation domains, so ISDs, which are trust-based groupings of networks. And with those optimizations, we can actually allow to configure rates for 100,000 networks and still only require 5.3 kilobytes of memory. Let's have a look at the Z-Lane gateway next. So the purpose of the gateway is to distribute the network-level guaranteed rates to end hosts. Also, the gateway implements bandwidth isolation for end hosts in the same network. In this example, an operator would configure 1 megabits per second for a specific IP address or IP address range. The gateway then authorizes and authenticates rate-compliant traffic such that devices further along the forwarding path, like routers, they can then authenticate or verify the authenticity of that traffic. However, if an end host overuses its guaranteed rate, then the overused traffic is either not authorized or completely dropped, depending on the operator's policy. In terms of security, we observed that other systems are often reactive, so they try to detect malicious traffic to then block it. In contrast, Z-Lane is proactive, so it tries to provide forwarding guarantees that work immediately, and also they are independent of the traffic pattern of the attackers. Attacks from other networks can either be based on unauthenticated or authenticated traffic. If an attack is based on unauthenticated traffic, then it doesn't have any effect on authenticated traffic from network 1 due to being forwarded with strictly lower priority at routers. If the attack is based on authenticated traffic, then still it cannot deplete the forwarding guarantees provided to network 1 due to source authentication and bandwidth isolation at the router. And similarly, attacks from other end hosts in the same network are mitigated through bandwidth isolation at the gateway. We also implemented and deployed Z-Lane on CyanLab, which is a global research testbed for Cyan. There we showed seamless integration into the Cyan ecosystem, as we did not observe any issues during our 3 months testing period. Also, we could show that incremental deployment was working correctly, both at the level of whole networks and individual routers. We also implemented a high-speed version of the Z-Lane router and gateway in DPDK, where we demonstrated 160 gigabits per second forwarding on commodity hardware. Also, we showed correct traffic scheduling, so correct bandwidth isolation. This figure shows the performance of our high-speed gateway. And we can observe that the performance scales linearly with number of dedicated cores, which is a very desirable property. Also, an operator can scale performance further by deploying additional gateways. In conclusion, our objective was to provide communication guarantees to short-lived intermediate rate traffic despite network targeting volumetric DDoS attacks. Our proposal is a system called Z-Lane, which can actually coexist with bandwidth reservation systems. Thereby, bandwidth reservation systems would protect non-setup critical communication, such as video conferencing or video streaming traffic, while Z-Lane would protect short-lived, intermediate-rate traffic, such as access to websites. We believe that Z-Lane can be a foundation for building exciting new applications, such as highly available DNS systems. Thank you very much for your attention.